At this time of the year, the light is coming back to the Isle of Man, and we all feel a little bit of spring fever, and we're seeing signs of life out in the garden and all around us, birds chirping and flying about. And there are signs of life in the garden as far as flowers and vegetables and plants. And we see things like daffodils coming up, and we see crocus and snowdrops. But the most important flower on the Isle of Man right now is the dandelion, and that is because it is an important source of food for bees. And a lot of people will be breaking out the lawnmower and cutting the grass in February and early March. But I'd actually recommend that people leave strips of dandelions to bloom, and that's specifically for food for bees.
And as we know, bees are very important in pollinating all the plants and the flowers across the island.
Well, that's right. So not only do they pollinate our food that grows later on in the year, but they need food early in the year to survive. And if we cut down plants that are early food sources, then we don't have them for later in the year.
Yeah, sorry. And I think already around the island I've spotted not dandelion, sorry, daffodil stalks coming up, already shown but not yet blooming.
That's right. So in the autumn, we plant bulbs. So we plant tulips and we plant daffodils and crocus, and they come back every year about this time. And they are cheerful and beautiful, and we love picking them for bouquets, for our homes, and just enjoying them outside. But they are actually an important food source for bees as well, especially crocus and snowdrops. But what's really interesting is that once a bee goes into a crocus flower and collects pollen, that flower dies. So only one flower per bee when it comes to that. But we can enjoy them as well.
Oh my goodness, that's so interesting. Like I didn't even know that before. But why do you think these types of flowers bloom at this time of year? I mean, would they bloom at other times of year, or is it just this time of year?
The reason that bulb flowers bloom at this time of the year is that they're woodland flowers. And so at this time of the year, there's no leaves on the trees in woodland settings. And so those flowers and plants would have an opportunity to grow before the leaf cover comes on. And we plant them in different areas, so places that are not woodland type areas. And so we don't necessarily see that relationship. But later on in the year, in May, you start to see bluebells and other types of low light flowers. And so you do associate those with woodland settings.
And are those still within the spring season? I mean, we're going into early summer, I think, or is it still spring?
It's still spring until the end of June, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people tend to think, oh, bluebells summer, but yeah, as you said.
Yeah, we tend to think of them as kind of tea time, and they come right at the same time as wild garlic in many cases. But yeah, so early on in the year, so February and March are leaner times when it comes to flowers. And I think that makes every single blossom precious for us, but also for pollinators.
Absolutely. And in terms of like the edible kind of plants, I mean, we think that's more towards summer. But if you're foraging out there, are there any certain plants that are available in the springtime?
Wild garlic is one, and that is one of the easiest to identify and to pick, although you shouldn't dig them up. Only pick a leaf or two from the same small area, just so that the plants will survive and they'll come back. Early in the spring, there isn't a whole lot in the vegetable garden. There are things like purple sprouting broccoli, and if you've overwintered some root crops, you might have the last of the parsnips and beetroot ready to go. This time of the year, we start sowing seeds for salad greens and for early spinach and things like that. But it is relatively scarce in the vegetable garden.
I can imagine, especially with all this cold weather we've been having. And why are these particular seeds sown now? Does it take quite a while for them to grow and develop?
No, and that's the reason why. And also they're a little bit more cold hardy. So lettuces and greens, they don't need as much time to mature, and they don't need a lot of sunshine. So a lot of plants like tomatoes and fruits, basically plants that fruit, beans, all of that, they need a longer growing period. They need a lot more warmth and sunshine. But things that are green and leafy don't need as much. So you can grow a lot of those in the spring and the autumn.
That's amazing. And do you think that a lot of the wildflowers and the what edible plants are available, do they reflect the colours and the feelings of spring?
I think the very first flush of spring is this vibrant green, and you can see a lot of perennial plants start coming back to life, and there'll be little bright green nodules coming out of the soil. So yes, that pastel color of fresh green, and also the pastel colors of primroses and the celandines coming through, that lovely yellow. Yes, indeed, they are the colors of Easter and spring.
And I think a lot of us, when we see them blooming, we think, oh, change of the season. It immediately brightens your mood.
Yes, absolutely. It gets us outside and doing things like cutting the grass. But I'd like to say again, please leave a few dandelions for the bees.
Yeah. And when can we see bees in the springtime?
You can see them right now.
Oh, really?
Well, bumblebees will take a little bit longer to come out of hibernation, but honeybees don't go into true hibernation. And on days like today, if I go to look at my colonies, there'll be a few bees coming in and out. They'll be checking to see if it's warm enough, going out to do some cleansing flights, looking around for some early sources of food and pollen. So yes, if you keep your eyes spotted on things like crocuses, you might see some bees.
I definitely will after this. And have there been any new species of wildflower seen across the island or even the British Isles over the past few years?
I believe that there was one, but I can't remember what it was called. You'd have to speak to the Manx Wildlife Trust about that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there was. Don't put this in the thing, but yeah, I can't quite remember it. I'm not a wildflower specialist. Andre Doubledam is the person that you want to talk to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. That's fine. I think we've covered everything. I could always ask, how is there when sowing seeds? Is there a particular method of doing this?
It's different based on the type of seed. It's I think the easiest thing to do is to get a packet of seeds and look on the back because there'll be instructions, and every seed will need to go at a different depth. Different seeds germinate at different temperatures and different times of the year even. So it's a complicated answer, and you learn that more with experience and having a look either on the seed packets or online.
Yeah. And do you have any favourite particular plants at this time of year or flowers?
This time of the year, what are my favorite? I do love snowdrops, and I have a little container of them by my back door, and so that is a sign of early spring for me. And then I also have a lot of perennial alliums, so chives and Welsh onions and things like that, and they start coming up really early as well. In fact, my garlic chives are already fully green and leaved, and that's the first early herb that comes up in my garden.